The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. Back after a few days with an emergency podcast. Sam, the Phoenix Suns have hired a head coach. How you doing?
We do this every year. Is it that much of an emergency
anymore? It's a yearly tradition, yeah.
I'm good. I'm hopped up on a bit too much coffee, to be honest with you. But I'm glad for your sake that we get to record this today.
Yeah.
Because I know you're heading out of town, and really I thought it was going to break like as soon as you left. Like I thought this was going to happen tomorrow or Friday, but it happened for you.
Yeah.
The Suns have a new coach. Their fourth coach in 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fourth hire in 4 years. Eighth coach in Devin Booker's career.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go again, back on the treadmill, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about here with the guy they chose.
Yeah, we really have an offseason where we just have filled up brand new names for us to blame all of our problems on. We have Brian Gregory, and now we have Jordan Ott. Jordan Ott was hired as the Phoenix Suns head coach to a 4-year contract, according to Gambo. The story, I believe, was broken by Shams Charania this morning. That's at least how I saw the news. Jordan Ott was, of course, the leader in the clubhouse, if you will, the guy who you and I expected the most to get the job because of his ties to Michigan State University, but is a coach, I think, who is worthy of a head coaching job based on his resume at least, and is a young coach who's worked on some interesting teams in the past. What was your first reaction to this?
I mean, look, I just have to be honest. The first reaction is, of course, it was him, because I'm going to try my best on this episode to not hold any of this against Jordan Ott, in particular because I have to remember that, first of all, we haven't heard Jordan Ott speak yet, and sort of outline. I don't know. We haven't heard him. We haven't heard him have really a chance to outline like his particular vision and what he sees for the future of the Suns, and there's the whole Devin Booker angle of it too, and we'll get to that. I have to remind myself that some of my frustration today is not centered or not directed at who Jordan Ott is as a coach and his resume, but just like leftover angst that I'm still kind of just pissed off about the fact that Bartelstein is with the organization and that the Brian Gregory hire went down the way it did. And to now tap yet another guy who comes from MSU, again, we could talk about Ott's resume, and we have. He's worked for a lot of teams, and he's worked in a lot of interesting different situations, places where he had to deal with big egos. The Nets with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. The Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. These are, difficult tasks to manage as an assistant coach. So it's not like he doesn't have experience. But it just too obviously fits this pattern of, I hate to say it, but basically the definition of cronyism that we've seen from Ishbia, where for whatever reason, he vastly overestimates the importance of people who come from the same region of the country as he does. And I still don't understand why that is. And maybe it has no bearing on Ott's ability to do a good job as head coach of the Suns.
Yeah.
He just got signed to a 4-year deal. I pray that this is the guy who they commit to for a full 4 years. And that he ends up...
Yeah.
And longer, and that he ends up doing a great job, right? But it's... Yeah, you ask my first thought. It is impossible to not have that be your first thought when yet another Michigan guy comes into the organization, to question the process of how Ishbia is handling constructing the organization from the ground up.
Yes, it's I actually think like part of it for me was this long protracted, extended interview process where they started with 15 guys, dropped it down to 10 or 11, then 6, then 2, and then 1, and they had to fly to Michigan for the final interview. This sort of drawn out, dramatic process of interviewing all of these guys only to pick the guy who we thought from the beginning was the most likely candidate just because of that. It feels a little silly, you know.
It's almost offensive to the other candidates, to be quite frank. I mean, if I'm Chris Quinn, and I think I said this maybe on a Patreon episode last week or something, but if I'm Chris Quinn, if I'm Micah Nori, if I'm James Borrego, I don't know, these guys who have had head coaching positions in the past or are longtime respected assistant coaches who have interviewed for many jobs at this point, to be strung up like that and have to make multiple appearances and deal with all the drama of this long drawn out process. It just feels profoundly silly. It feels like they're covering up for something.
In a world where Matt Ishbia has not hired Josh Bartelstein with very little experience for a really high up job, or in a world where he hasn't hired Brian Gregory, a man who is clearly not qualified for the job that he's gotten, both because they had ties to Michigan. On Jordan Ott's resume, his time where he spent as a video coordinator for Tom Izzo in Michigan State is a plus on his resume. Like, that's actually a good thing. You know, but the fact that the other two guys that have existed in the positions that they exist, not to mention the other guys on the team with Michigan ties, it just makes you question it. And that's really unfair to him. Because if you look at Jordan Ott's resume as a whole, if you look at the way people are speaking about him, and I think we're getting more and more about that now, and of course we're not going to get anything negative once a coach was hired. We're going to get all the good stuff right here at the beginning. He deserves this job. He's a guy who deserves this job. And I actually, ultimately, I'll be honest, kind of excited about him. I know this is the sort of the beginning of optimism season, right? This is when it starts for all of us, when we start talking ourselves into next year's team. I just think having a young coach who's worked with interesting coaches in the past and has some sort of forward-thinking view of the NBA is something that I've wanted in the past. And look, it didn't work out with the other guys that were on this team in the past. I think Vogel, there's a lot, he's had a bit of a glow-up. I think since then we saw how badly it went with Mike Budenholzer. I think Vogel deserves some credit for what he got out of that team when he got it. I think our opinions on what makes a good coach has sort of changed because of the last two coaches for the Suns. I really liked Monty Williams, of course, but yeah.
Of course. I've seen a lot of people bring that up just in the past hour. I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I am included in this group of people who's kind of hemming and hawing online about this hire. And a lot of people are saying, well, you know, think about how excited Suns fans were for Frank Vogel and then Mike Budenholzer and how that turned out. So why don't we go in this other direction and try something different? And I absolutely agree with that to an extent. I think it was a good choice for them to go in a different direction, to go younger, usher in a new generation of coach, someone who potentially has, as Gambo's saying, a different level of sophistication when it comes to their X's and O's. Mm-hmm. That is a particular phrase that Gambo used, and thank you to Gambo, by the way, for just saying something that isn't the most boilerplate, vague thing possible about this guy, like Shams did, so that we actually have something. Like, if I'm not going to be there at the press conference because I'm not a journalist, but now I would anticipate the journalists who are there to ask him or confront him directly about that. You know, like what does that mean? What is your vision for a futuristic offense for the Suns? What is the sophistication there? That's absolutely something they should be asking him about. But we should just be very clear again. If they had hired anyone else for the Brian Gregory position who just didn't have the Michigan State connection, there would not be all of this kind of discomfort around Jordan Ott being hired today, right? If they had just, it's a lot of leftover.
We'd still make jokes about it for sure. But it wouldn't be the same level of, like, Jesus Christ.
It's a lot of it is just coming from this general discomfort, this bad taste we got in our mouths that's left over from a month ago when they hired Gregory and the whole alignment press conference and all of that. And again, I'm going to do my best to not hold that against Ott. I do believe he is a good candidate. It's just, this is something that unfortunately, like, he had to take the job. There was one vacancy. Now I guess there's two because the Knicks just fired Thibodeau. But throughout this process, as he was interviewing, there was one vacancy in the entire NBA. He'd be stupid not to take this opportunity. It's just unfortunate for him that this is now a narrative that he has to overcome to try and prove himself.
Yeah, look, the other thing that was immediately reported by Shams Charania is that Devin Booker wanted him. Devin Booker was in on this hire. He was involved in the last round of interviews, and let's see, how did he word it? He said, Suns franchise cornerstone Devin Booker was involved in the search process during the final stages and stamped Ott as his top choice as well, sources said. And then he mentioned Ott has been in NBA coaching staffs with the Hawks, Nets, Lakers, Cavs, and also, of course, didn't mention this in his tweet, but also was a video coordinator with Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans while he was there getting his master's degree. Devin Booker, also from Michigan. Worth saying, but I really don't think there's any precedent to that mattering with Devin Booker's decisions. So I think we can actually say that Devin Booker probably liked him. Since that was reported, we also had in the same tweet that you were talking about where Gambo said what they liked about Ott was work ethic / drive and a different level of sophistication with his offensive system than other candidates. And then he also mentioned he got the seal of approval from Devin Booker and expanded and said Steve Nash had very positive feedback as well. So ultimately, I think PR-wise, and this is probably true, getting the two most popular players of the most recent eras of Suns basketball and getting their input and both of them recommending him. And for those who don't remember or haven't been listening, he worked under Steve Nash in Brooklyn. Jordan Ott did, so he was an assistant to Steve Nash in Brooklyn. Getting those two guys' approval, I mean, that goes a long ways. Those two guys are very smart basketball players that have a lot of experience in the NBA. Steve Nash is obviously extremely well liked and seems to have a very sophisticated understanding of modern basketball. And, I think did a good job in Brooklyn ultimately, even though that team fires everyone. I'm glad Devin Booker likes him. This is important. I'm happy that was part of the reporting. Part of me does sort of think Matt Ishbia understands the criticism he's going to get from this, so he made sure that the second tweet was about how Devin Booker wanted him to, which is still smart. And if it's true, it's still good. But yeah.
We haven't gotten any confirmation of this. These are details that maybe they'll come out in the ensuing days. But I did hypothesize last week as well that I think Booker, regardless of what we know is probably going to happen, Kevin Durant's probably going to be traded in the coming weeks. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are still very close. Devin Booker has a very trusting relationship with KD, and so it would not surprise me, I said last week, if Book was asking KD directly about his relationship with Ott, since not only was Ott Steve Nash's assistant, but he also coached Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. And so, maybe as the KD stamp of approval too, in which case I could see Book getting on board. It also does make me wonder, the thing about Ott being a young coach, he has been around the league for 10 years as a part of 4 different organizations. So I would think it wouldn't be all too challenging for him to construct a coaching staff, but it's a little bit more challenging when you're first starting out. You're in your early 40s or however old he is exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of times owners are like, let's get them the old guy who's been around the block and has been a head coach, and I kind of hope they don't do that.
Let's keep David Fizdale on for
I kind of hope they don't do that. I kind of hope
I hope they don't do that too. But just to say, if you're 55 years old, you have your established coaching tree. It's easier to build a staff. And so I am curious. I'm very curious about who Jordan Ott is going to tap to be his assistants. Do you think
Gambo talked about that on the radio? Do you want to know the guy he mentioned as potentially his lead assistant coach? I think you wouldn't guess it if you didn't see it.
Well, I was about to say Steve Nash.
I mean, that's interesting, but he said Jared Dudley.
Interesting. Where did they work together?
I think Jared Dudley was on the Nets when he was there. He was a player on the Nets when he was there.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
You might be right. I didn't think about that.
So that is actually kind of an interesting one. Jared Dudley, of course, I think maybe was part of the initial round of interviews, but didn't get past that initial round. And maybe Jared Dudley's not quite there yet to be a head coach and could use something like this. Obviously played in Phoenix. I don't think there's a single tie to the organization that was here when Dudley was here, unless him and James Jones maybe overlapped as players.
So in 2018-19, Dudley and Ott overlapped for one season. when he was on the Nets, and it was Ott's first season as an assistant. So that would have been at the time Kenny Atkinson. Interesting.
Yeah, you know
so
what?
Jordan Ott was Kenny Atkinson's assistant. He was Kenny Atkinson's assistant twice, right? Once this past year in Cleveland, they have an incredible franchise season until the playoffs, obviously. But Kenny Atkinson's stint before Steve Nash in Brooklyn, Jared Dudley was a kind of on the fringes starting level player, towards the tail end of his career, but still playing like 20, 25 minutes per game on that team. So that is a good shout by you there.
Yeah, it's Gambo who mentioned it, so we'll see if that ends up being something that the Suns do. I think Jared Dudley seems to be pretty respected. In the locker room as a player, he was very respected and seems to be someone who's respected as an assistant coach, so I think that would be a good one to bring in. And also, I think his time in Dallas is probably helpful to him as well. They've had good defense. But something I really appreciate that Gambo mentioned, the level of sophistication with his offensive system. The Suns have talked so much about defense in this offseason since every opportunity that they've had to speak, whether it be Matt Ishbia, Brian Gregory, or Bartlestein and Jones. They talked about defense, and that's important. It's very important. But having lived through Terry Porter, and like the idea of a team sort of overcorrecting to one side of the ball because it didn't look good the previous season, I was a little worried that they were leaving offense sort of on the back burner.
The modern day Orlando Magic would be kind of the modern day version of a Terry Porter team, I think.
Yeah, or no, like imagine if you had a defensive coach with a bunch of offensive
with a bunch of offensive players who are just incapable of implementing that scheme.
And Devin Booker, for all his pluses, is more of an offensive player.
I mean, that's kind of what
defensive player.
That's kind of what Frank Vogel was. With the Suns.
And he did a good job.
They kind of did as decent a job as he possibly could. But to your point, it was like they hired Frank Vogel to be this defensive mastermind, and then gave him Yusuf Nurkic as the defensive anchor, and Bradley Beal and KD
Devin
and Book
Booker,
and just not the defensive tools he needed to implement a reasonable system. And miraculously, they still finished that season like 12th or 13th in defensive rating.
And
this past year,
and it was second half of the year top 10.
This past year they were 28th, and so I understand why they would go in the Gregory press conference emphasizing defense, because they recognize that the product on the floor last season was embarrassing, and if they want to engage fans, sell tickets, season tickets this year, they need to build a sustainable defense for the future.
Yeah.
But beyond that, beyond just getting them back to a point of respectability, if they want to be a good team that can actually win playoff games, they need an offensive approach that's modern too. It just can't be more 2006 Jimbo ball.
You can't play Orlando Magic offense, right? You have to have both sides. Every great team is good at both sides of the ball, and including OKC, who of course is maybe generational defense. I hate to say it like that, but possibly generational level defense, but still plays a modern version of offense. And for the Suns, I just wanted a guy who could do both, and it seems like they really did get someone who can do both. Shout out, by the way, to Kellen, who had Chris Fedor, I think is how you say his name, on their podcast recently, and he talked about how Jordan Ott is credited with working with Evan Mobley on a day-to-day basis, every single day this last season, which I think is an interesting thing to point out too, because Mobley had a monster season for them, and he won Defensive Player of the Year.
No, he didn't. Did he? Wait.
I think he did, didn't he?
Oh yeah, no, he did. He did win defensive. Sorry,
you doubt myself.
No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to gaslight you right there. He absolutely did win Defensive Player of the Year. You're right. I was already thinking about my next point, which was to complain a little bit. I'm sorry, because we don't have an Evan Mobley on the roster. I mean, maybe they want to go and get one, but I'm a little confused. So you had the two Cleveland assistants. This is just where, it's kind of a divergent philosophy that confuses me a little bit, because you had these two Cleveland assistants. You have Ott, and then you have Johnny Bryant. And the idea was, based on what we'd heard of them, I guess Ott is the guy who works with Evan Mobley. I mean, they all do everything, but Johnny Bryant was the guy who works with Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
And if you try and project that onto the Suns roster, the Suns have a Donovan Mitchell. His name is Devin Booker. Maybe Suns fans don't want to hear that comparison.
No, I mean, this year it's probably a good comparison because Donovan Mitchell.
It's fairly 1-to-1. The Suns don't have an Evan Mobley. I would love to have an Evan Mobley. Maybe their idea is to go and trade for. Maybe that's Jabari Smith Jr. is what they like envision.
I'm
going
to keep saying Jaren Jackson Jr. because of the everything.
That
else
would be
that's
awesome.
happened. Yeah,
that would be awesome. I'll tell you what though. I like Oso, but it's not Oso Ighodaro. Like you don't hire a new coach to be like, we have to develop Oso Ighodaro into Evan Mobley. Because
I don't know, man. The guy that was involved with drafting them was
probably not
promoted
going to
to general manager. So
it's probably not going to happen. So I like the fact that he has this track record in theory of working with bigs on their development. It just isn't necessarily a reason to like celebrate him over the other half dozen finalist candidates for the Suns roster right now specifically, because our bigs are Nick Richards and Oso Ighodaro. Like we got to sort that out a little bit more. If that's your reason for hiring him.
You're going to run out of coffee at some point, so you might as well order some now. Take out your phone, go to your computer, go to alchemyroaster.com. That's alchemyroaster.com and buy some coffee now. Alchemy Roast is a Metro Phoenix-based coffee roaster that focuses on the transformational process of coffee from seed to cup. They're about more than just coffee. They're about passion, dedication, and community. They're a small batch roastery committed to sourcing the finest beans and mastering the art of the roast. And they do it ethically. That's right, ethical beans. You can get 10% off your coffee order now by using the promo code TIMELINE at alchemyroaster.com. That's TIMELINE at alchemyroaster.com in the promo code section of your checkout. Get some great coffee. Support a local Phoenix business that makes excellent coffee, and support us on the podcast by using that promo code. That's alchemyroaster.com, promo code TIMELINE for the best coffee you can get.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
It's just to run down some of the stuff that Gambo mentioned on the radio. Shout out to Gambo for giving us content every podcast. Ishbia had never met Ott until the final interview yesterday. Surprising, to be honest, considering their overlap with their alma maters. They liked how sophisticated and detailed his offensive and defensive schemes were. He did mention that he was Book's preferred candidate. They took input of Nash, of course. The Jared Dudley thing was a big thing. And then I want to talk about this at the end of the podcast, but also mention expected KD trade soon, which is something that was also mentioned in the Shams Charania article. And then he also said that Ott's offensive system will have better spacing and more cutting, which, by the way, terrible cutting team, the Suns last year.
I mean, they were just such a... pathetic is a word for a limp-dicked. Like, I don't know how I would describe it exactly, but they were just a flaccid team in every aspect. They just could not care less so much of the time on the court. Lack of transition defense, lack of transition offense. So many holes to fill. So yeah, I mean, I welcome a guy who has better ideas offensively and defensively. I just wonder what those conversations looked like with Booker, because if you asked Booker specifically how does he want to play, what do you think he would say?
Faster, considering he seemed to have guys trying to run down the court when he was on the court without Kevin Durant, is one thing I would say. And I think
he wants my guess is that he does want to play faster, but he also probably wants to be bigger. And those are two points which are not necessarily unaligned in the NBA these days. They might seem at odds with each other a little bit, but it is possible. Like, I'm sure Booker recognizes the total lack of athleticism in his teammates around him. And so maybe he wants to run, but he recognizes he can't run with Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal next to him on the wings, you know?
Yeah.
There has to be a different level of energy as he, is still in his prime, but, maybe doesn't even have the athletic burst that he had 5 or 6 years ago.
What do you want? How do you want the Suns to play under Jordan Ott? Do you have opinions on that?
I mean, much the same as I just said. I do want them to be big. I do want them to be faster. Big, to me, doesn't necessarily mean playing two bigs at a time. It can, just because that's something that Gregory mentioned. That's really dependent on personnel. If you have the spacing to be able to do it, if you have a 6'10" power forward who shoots 5 or 6 threes a game and is mobile, then maybe you can play two bigs. But it's not a necessity for me. And I do want to focus on mobility, but there are certain centers mobility-wise who scare me a little bit. We've talked about Nick Claxton just as an example of someone who's probably, could be on the move, is not like a dream target by any means, but would just be an upgrade over Richards. And that's the type of guy who
kind of had a down season, so I think his value on the trade market is probably in a good place if you're trying to trade for him.
Yeah, had a big down season. I'm just wary of guys who are undersized at any position at this point, right? So Claxton is fast for a center, undoubtedly, but he's also thin. Has always had a thin frame.
Yeah, it's a switch everything center. Yeah,
it's a switch everything center who doesn't shoot.
Yeah,
we already have one of those in Oso.
Yeah,
and I would be wary of having another one. And so I guess just it's a really difficult ask, but at every position, I would love to have a guy who's just 2 inches taller, 2 inches longer, and a little bit faster than the guy he's replacing.
Yeah,
and
part of me
asking
wonders
for
if,
that plus skill is difficult, but that's kind of what I want.
Maybe the Cavs are going to look to shed some salary, being that their salary situation next year is kind of a disaster, and you can get Jared Allen or something. I think he's pretty valuable on the trade market, but just throwing it out there as the Suns apparently prioritizing a center in the KD trade negotiations. A couple things I want to mention for how I would like the Suns to play next year if we can hold them accountable to stuff like this. And this is how the Cavs played, by the way. Offensively, first of all, get it over the half-court line faster. I'm tired of starting your offense with 16 seconds left on the shot clock. Get it over the half-court line faster. Start your offense faster. So that means in transition, play faster. After makes, play faster. But in the half-court, play faster. Play faster in the half-court as well. None of this half-ass running around screens, Bradley Beal-style offense. Play with purpose. Still, I'm not going to say that we're changing this philosophy from Mike Budenholzer. Shoot a lot of threes still. We need to continue to shoot a lot of threes. That's still the right way to play. Shoot a lot of threes. Whether or not that's Devin Booker doing it, we'll see, because it didn't work well last year for him. Percentage-wise, he might be the guy that doesn't do it. Everyone else needs to do it. If you're behind the three-point line, shoot, whether you have a great percentage from there or not. Play faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we've seen this willingness for them to go and draft guys Ryan Dunn is probably going to log more minutes next year, I would get. Well, I mean, it depends on who they trade for.
The guy who drafted him, the guy who takes credit for drafting him, was promoted to general manager. I'm going to keep saying this. They really believe in Ryan Dunn. That guy might start every single game.
Okay, well, and I want to spin it as a positive. We know Ryan Dunn's not a good shooter, but
I think it's good.
Ryan Dunn is going to play.
His development is going to be very important for this team going forward. He needs to develop into a better player on both sides of the ball, honestly, because they're putting a lot on him. And I think he's capable. Don't get me wrong.
I could see them drafting a lot of guys in June who are, defense first, not necessarily shooters immediately coming out of college. But even if that's the case, they need to mimic, unless maybe they're centers, but if they're a wing, they need to mimic Ryan Dunn's developmental path, where he came into the NBA immediately shooting 4 or 5 open threes a game.
Brian Gregory
even if he
said
didn't think he would be good at them.
He said guys that shoot 30% can still shoot as long as you get the offensive rebound. He said that in his press conference. This is something he truly believes. It seems like you still shoot, but you got to chase the offensive rebounds in a way that the Suns honestly never have.
missed threes, especially missed corner threes, but missed threes from anywhere, are the most likely shot to turn into long defensive rebounds for the other team that then become transition points on the other end. So this is where you need to be, you need to be athletic. You need to care enough to play transition defense, which they did not last year. Yeah. You also just need to be well-conditioned in a way that the Suns were not prepared last year. They would just get punched in the face way too often.
Yeah, look at Indiana.
Like, did they do training staff? Did they do training staff and Flagstaff? Training staff. Did they do training camp in Flagstaff last year?
No.
Go back to Flagstaff for the entire summer and just run.
That's where Booker lives anyway.
That's what they need to do. Go to Flagstaff for the entire summer and just run for months. Yeah. They need to come in the best shape of their lives.
Rick Carlisle.
And if it's someone like Bradley Beal who's making $50 million, he doesn't care enough to do that.
He's gone.
But if it's a young guy in a rookie contract, he's gonna work his ass off. Or at least you draft a guy who you believe is gonna work his ass off.
Rick Carlisle said before last summer, he went to all the Pacers players and said, we need a summer of conditioning. We need to come back next year ready to run every single game. And this is a team that presses the whole game. Like, having good conditioning helps your offense as well as defense. And defensively, since I talked about offense, next year, this is the number one thing that you can do a lot of things defensively, right? You can play a drop, you can switch, you can hedge, you can ice. There's a lot of different defensive philosophies. A team needs to be prepared to do all. You can play zone, by the way. Zone is important in the playoffs.
They basically never played zone last year, and that's like something we don't point our fingers at enough as yet another failing of Budenholzer. Or maybe it's just the players were unwilling to hear him out. I don't know what it was, but they basically never went into a zone defense. No. And that's a massive tool that, like, no one plays zone for an entire game, but it was embarrassing.
It's the reason the OKC Denver series went to 7 games. The only team that had any chance of beating OKC. It's because of a zone defense.
It's one of those things, like, look, if you don't tune into every game, that's one of those things you might not notice. But if you're watching every game and eventually you're like, we never change it up by just throwing a zone at like a superstar player for, half a quarter or whatever and try and go on a run. And it was just another way in which they frequently were unprepared. Especially, when they went up against other playoff teams or just playoff teams in general, they were easily outmatched.
And the Cavs, by the way, do occasionally play a zone, and they put Mobley at the top of the zone, which is kind of an interesting thing that they did, to put a big at the top. But anyway, preparedness. This is what I wanted to talk about. The Suns were never prepared on defense last year. It's like the team didn't know the game plan before the game. And I contrast that constantly with the Monty Williams Suns, which, regardless of if they won or they lost, it was very clear what their goals were offensively and defensively in every single game, regular season or playoffs. And in playoffs, maybe that goal didn't adjust enough for some people's liking. But to contrast that with the Mike Budenholzer era Suns, they didn't know where they were supposed to be on the court on defense. The Suns need to be prepared defensively. And by the way, add to that, there's another level of physicality in the NBA now. That needs to be part of what the Suns do. Now, that's personnel more than anything else. Like, the personnel needs to change in order to do that. Yeah, but to play more physical is going to be important as well.
It's partially personnel, of course, and it's partially like, look, people, to make another comparison to the playoffs right now, you get to a point where you have a certain reputation that refs allow more physicality once they know to expect it from you. That's why you have so many people complaining in these playoffs about what Caruso, what Lou Dort, guys like that for OKC, what they're able to get away with. And I think that's like 70% true. I think that absolutely is, eventually you get a reputation that precedes you and then refs allow more from you. But part of it is also just like, you look at the Suns roster last year, and can you imagine Grayson Allen try as hard as he might, or Royce O'Neal or Tyus Jones? Like, a ref could allow all the physicality in the world from a guy like that, and they just wouldn't care enough to do what a guy like Lou Dort does. Right. Or a guy like Alex Caruso does, right? It's just one more example where guys lacked the motor. For whatever reason, they would go into a game and they just thought it would come easy. Like, light ball pressure was all they needed to do. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you need guys who get it from day one. And then eventually you hope that they develop that reputation where, as the season goes on, you gain some even more defensive momentum because officials are allowing you to get away with more of that physicality, and that's going to trickle into the playoffs. I'm really curious about the offensive thing.
Yeah.
Because especially if this is going to be a one-star team, and we've talked about some avenues where, maybe they can get another star next year next to Devin Booker. Maybe they're going to try. But I think in the median scenario and the average scenario, it's a one-star team with an offense constructed around Devin Booker, who is a superbly talented player, but like not overly physical and not the best shooter in the world. And I think developing a really sophisticated offense around just him is a challenge.
I'm
curious how they're going to do it.
You basically have to have players that are sort of cannot be targeted on either end of the. You can't leave them open on offense. You can't target them on defense in order to have a good team around a one-star player. Like you can point at the Indiana Pacers and say they are, but look, Pascal Siakam is a multi-time All-NBA player who just won Western Conference Finals MVP or whatever they call that, Eastern Conference Finals MVP or whatever they call that award. So obviously they have two stars on that team, and I think you can say it that way. But let me just say,
I mean the Knicks with Cat too. Like say what you will about Cat, but that's a great offensive player. OKC with Jalen Williams. Like I understand, people
they're
say
all
that
better than what the Suns are going to have as their second offensive player next year. But these are teams that are in the
unless they
finals.
pivot. Unless they pivot for Trae Young or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Because, yes, maybe the era of the big three is dead, and you don't need a big three to get this far in the playoffs anymore. But you still need like a decent number two option. You can't just have one guy who scores 30 points per game and everyone else scores 10.
Yeah.
I would be very, very surprised if that strategy ever worked.
It's the combo of at least two guys and depth, which is a tough thing to have in the NBA now, but that's kind of the second apron era of basketball that we live in. The Suns earn these jokes. The people are getting off online, that we're getting off online or on the podcast or whatever. They earn them with the hirings they made. Like part of me in some ways almost respects that Matt Ishbia doesn't care and still just hired the guy that he wants, because it's like he doesn't care. He for sure doesn't care. He definitely knows about them. Maybe he sees the Phoenix Suns Michigan State photoshops and likes them.
He definitely
maybe he
sees
actually
some of it.
likes them.
Can I just say I think it's shameful, and I also find it inspiring at the same time. And here's how I mean. I don't have a connection. I went to college. I went to a state school, public school. I do not have the connection to that small Division III school that Matt Ishbia has to Michigan State. Nor do I ever see myself growing into this just like enormous position of power. But if I do, I'll make a promise to you guys right now, and this will be the Patreon plug for today. If I ever get into just some crazy position of power, my version of Michigan State is I'm only hiring people who are in the Timeline podcast Discord. All of my bros, all of my people in the Timeline podcast Discord.
The smartest, most handsome Suns fans, yeah.
Exactly. Y'all are going to be my cronies. I am hiring all of you. So don't worry. Join the Discord, and we'll ascend the ranks together.
So, having said that they've earned the jokes, I will say I'm still excited about Jordan Ott. I think that he is a worthy coaching candidate, and I really hope he does a great job with the Phoenix Suns. I think he has a really tough task ahead of him. But that task, I think there is some sort of... the sun is behind the clouds, if you will. There's a silver lining because... part of Shams Charania's report, this is how he worded it. With their coaching hire set, the Suns now begin the franchise's offseason of changes to the roster. The Suns will work with all-star forward Kevin Durant and his business partner, boardroom CEO Rich Kleiman. By the way, shout out Rich Kleiman for making sure his name is mentioned in every single one of these reports, because it happens every time. On his next landing spot, he is expected to have, important part here, a robust market of approximately 4 to 6 seriously interested teams this offseason, sources said. So hidden in this coaching report was that Kevin Durant and his market, which was sort of talked about as if it were dead mere weeks ago, is now being described as a robust market for Kevin Durant by Shams Charania, which I think things have sort of broken in a way I think that benefits the Suns, in the case that, you know, if there are multiple teams that are interested in KD, maybe you can get an extra asset or two out of a team that is interested in trading for him. And Gambo has said multiple times that he expects the Kevin Durant trade by the draft. So that gives us just a few weeks.
Awesome.
Just a few weeks to find out where Kevin Durant's next destination will be.
First of all, I love that, not just because of the speed. It's not necessarily the speed of them working on the KD trade that I care about all too much, but the fact that they want to complete it by the draft tells me and everyone else, obviously, that they're interested in draft assets this year. And, I'm sure they're interested in other stuff too. They want other prospects or maybe to flip for a star or
to move
whatever.
Up for Jace Richardson, yeah.
Please stop.
I'm only saying it can't be called a joke anymore when it keeps happening.
I know, but it's different. Look, it's one thing to hire all of your friends to be in the executive role, and I don't like that. But it's another thing. It is just so profoundly stupid if we actually get to the point where he's like, I think all the best players went to the same school as me.
To be fair, that hasn't happened yet, so I guess we'll see.
I know. Yeah. So I'm saying that's the next step. If that happens, we all have the right to be very angry. And Jace Richardson, who we've talked about on the pod now, go back and listen to our episode from 2 days ago, by the way, if you haven't.
Yeah.
Because more than half of that is draft coverage, and it's a longer episode than usual. Thank you to Tyler Rucker again for coming on to talk with us. Trading up for Jace Richardson would make me very angry.
And they might not have to. I like Jace Richardson, and they might not have to.
But I like the fact that they're interested in draft assets at all. And I like the fact that all of these people who are talking up the idea online, many of them national heads, about the Suns have no leverage, are going to be found dead in a ditch. Because Houston has to be sweating a little bit. Might have to give us Reed Shepherd. Might have to give us Cam Whitmore. San Antonio might have to give us Stephon Castle. KD could very easily come out. This is what I love about this too, and what I'm still afraid could happen, is KD coming out and saying, I will only play in
San Antonio.
X.
Yeah.
I will only play in San Antonio. I will only play in Houston. The fact that he and his agent are willing to play ball a little bit is very welcome news for the Suns. Because, again, 4 to 6 teams, we can easily conceive of being interested. That is a robust market, and they will get some combination of reasonable value for him. It might not single-handedly save the franchise. In fact, I'll tell you right now, it won't. If it's a package of, Stephon Castle and the 14th pick, which I think would be, the great backbone of a trade or whatever, but that's not going to come in and save the team next year. But we're not talking about there are Houston fans in my replies online being like, you're going to have to take Fred VanVleet and Jock Landale and a single pick. And it's not going to come to that. I really don't think so.
I don't think so either. Yeah, I think we saw what happened in the playoffs, and I think there are a couple teams that could use KD, and those teams are probably more interested than they're letting on. And I think we're going to find out where he goes pretty soon. Congratulations to Jordan Ott. Welcome to the Phoenix Suns. I'm sorry about the jokes. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's the fault of Matt Ishbia, but I do think that we can have a interesting season coming up, and I am ultimately kind of excited about this hire. Is that where you fall, by the way, or are you somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle, but I will say welcome to Phoenix, Jordan Ott, and I'll say the same thing that I said last year and the year before. I hope you see the end of your contract with this organization. Couldn't happen to Frank Vogel, couldn't happen to Mike Budenholzer. But whenever they hire a new guy, I'm going to start as the default on the side of that guy and root for him. So I'm looking forward to the introductory press conference. Looking forward to hearing about that sophisticated offensive system to build around Devin Booker. And look, man, you got to prove a lot of people wrong. I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy spot to be in, but ultimately winning cures all if he's able to do it.
That's right. No more episodes this week. I'm going out of town tonight, and I will be out of town till next week. So we'll have a new episode next week talking more about, there's probably going to be some rumors and maybe some more information. Maybe we'll try and find someone who has some sort of connection with a team that Jordan Ott has worked on and talked to them about what they know about him. But we appreciate you all for listening. Yes, and good luck to Jordan Ott and the Phoenix Suns.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to JohnnyWalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.